So I am joined here today by my cousin, Pat Guy. He is also on YouTube. You can find him at YouTube on Pat Guy. Today, this is all gonna be a James Bond type of day. Today, we are gonna be talking about James Bond. We have lists of the top 10 James Bond villains. And just to clear things up, this is not a top 10 list of like every villain, so it won't include henchmen, assassins, hitmen. We're gonna do a top 10 video for henchmen probably later on, but this is just like the main villains of the movies that we chose. None of their henchmen are included on this list. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so for number 10 for my list, I have Max Zorin from A View to a Kill. Mainly because he's played by Christopher Walken. And how can you not love Christopher Walken? Because he's gonna kill James Bond. He's gonna get him with his microchips in San Francisco. But he was a great villain, a lot of fun to watch, and he slaughtered a lot of people. So that's something about the Bond movies. I think he was the first villain to ever like slaughter people with like a machine gun.
He got his hands dirty. It was great.
Yeah.
And then he died in a fantastic way as well. So that's my number 10.
Alright, so my top 10 for number 10 differs from Patrick. My number 10 villain is from the newest movie Skyfall, and that is Raoul Silva. Raoul Silva, even though his plan is kind of simple, it's just to kill Bond's boss, who's M. He does make it convoluted and makes it, and that's why it's kind of a movie at the same time. I mean, you wouldn't have a movie if he was just like, oh, just go up to M and pop her in the head. Yeah. But I mean, like, his plan took a lot of planning. I liked the way Javier Bardem portrayed Silva. I thought he was kind of like erotic and like made Bond uncomfortable, which I thought worked really well in the movie. So Silva is my number 10.
For my number 9, I have Sanchez from License to Kill. He's a very violent villain. He's this drug cartel leader who injures Bond's friend Felix Leiter really badly, and then he kills Felix's wife, and he's abusive to his girlfriend, and he cuts out people his girlfriend cheats with, their hearts, and he's just very violent and hostile, and he's a pretty good bad guy.
He also has a cool death scene.
He does have a very cool death scene, but yeah, I like Sanchez, because I'm after Sanchez. And that was what the whole movie was about. So, I like Sanchez.
Good Timothy Dalton impersonation.
Thank you.
Alright, so my number 9 also differs from Pat. My number 9 is from the very first Bond movie called Dr. No. This guy is called Dr. No. This guy, I feel like he's a really, like, easygoing, like, villain. Like, he doesn't really, like, isn't that menacing, I guess, like, when you first see him. But, like, when you learn what his overall plan is, and that's to, like, take over the, like, American, like, space program, it's pretty sinister, and Pat was just kind of motioning his metal hands.
He has no hands.
Yeah, no hands. He's got metal hands, and he's actually what inspired Mike Myers to create Dr. Evil. Mm-hmm. So, but it is a good introduction. He's a good villain to start off the Bond series with, and it's a good like intro to what kind of organization SPECTRE is. Yep. So that's why he's number 9 for me.
Alright, so for my number 8, I have Dr. Kananga / Mr. Big from Live and Let Die. I like Kananga because he's just like, I like the duality between the two sides of him. He's like this kind of political figure on one side of him, and then on the other side he's like this like New Orleans gangster with this like makeup that makes him look somewhat different. It's extremely obvious it's just Kananga wearing makeup, so when he pulls off his skin and his fro, it's kind of obvious who's going to be underneath, because he still looks like him, just with like a bunch of crap all over his face. But I like Kananga a lot, and he also has a really funny death, and I like his lair, and I think he's a good bad guy, and I think his relationship with Solitaire is extremely interesting, and yeah, Kananga's a good Bond villain.
Alright, number 8 for me is also from a more recent one, the second Pierce Brosnan one, and that is Elliot Carver. Pretty much, Elliot Carver wants to start World War III with the media. I thought that was... I never really was a big fan of this when I was little. But the more and more I watched that one, I was just like, that is a brilliant idea. Plus, too, he's, like, established as a villain, like, right when the movie opens. It doesn't take, like, you know, build up to show that he's the villain, and... he's got some cool henchmen. his dialogue, I think, is pretty funny.
Yeah.
Like, especially when he's making fun of the Asian chick. Not to be racist, but and then like some other stuff he says too. But he's a formidable foe for Bond, and he's just a media mogul who wants power, which I thought was pretty cool. So Elliot Carver, number 8 for me.
So for my number 7, I have Elektra King from The World Is Not Enough.
Yeah.
Because, quite frankly, for a movie series that has so many beautiful, smart women in it, there's very few female Bond villains who are as smart and cunning as Elektra. It's kind of argued whether she's the main bad guy of the movie or Renard. It's kind of a bit of both, in my opinion. She's kind of the brains. But Elektra is just this beautiful villain and character played by Sophie Marceau, and she has this plan that's, you know, so-so, but I think the way she pulls it off is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was.
And like all Bond villains most Bond villains, she's got some sort of physical distinction about her. I'm not going to spoil it, but yeah, it's interesting.
She definitely is an interesting villain.
Yeah.
Alright, my number 7 is actually somebody Patrick already said, and that is Franz Sanchez from License to Kill. Kind of like what Pat said, you know, he's brutal, he's ruthless. The reason why I like him is because he, like Pat said also, he is like the head of a drug cartel, and it's something different for a Bond movie. Bond hasn't really taken down like a drug cartel or something like, I guess, domestic, you can say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
He hasn't taken down anybody who hasn't wanted to like dominate the world, and that was a nice change of pace for once. He's got some cool lines of dialogue. He's got an awesome death scene.
He also is kind of friends with Bond for a little while.
Yes, he is. Yes, I forgot about that. Yeah,
interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah, but like I said, Sanchez, you know, just not somebody you would picture Bond to go up against, and as a matter of fact, Bond does go rogue in this movie, and this is pretty much the reason why. It's because of this guy, which I felt was pretty cool in the movie. I think that's the first time we've seen Bond go rogue in a movie.
Yeah. Some of the best Bond villains are the ones that make it really personal.
Yeah.
And Sanchez made it personal.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So, yes. Sanchez, number 7 for me.
Okay, so my number 6 is also someone Alex has said in his list. I had him a little higher up. Some people might have him like top of the tier, but Raoul Silva from Skyfall, played by Javier Bardem. He's a great villain, don't get me wrong. He's very memorable, his performance is fantastic, but like Alex kind of said, his plan is just so small, and he makes it seem so big. I hate that about the movie. It seems like he has this grand plan because he's a super smart genius, like an antithesis to Bond, and then all of a sudden, all it comes down to is kill M. It's like you could just kill her. You don't have to plan this whole subway plan, or like rig all these things. It's just like, just kill her, man. I know you're psychotic, but you're making it so much harder than it has to be.
I feel like too with Silva, even though he is a really good villain, but it's like at the same time, like I feel like when they were writing him, they were trying to make him too much like the Joker.
Maybe a little. There was the whole plan. He let himself get caught.
Yeah.
So like that's kind of a running thing in movies lately, but yeah, he kind of let me down a little. I think his performance, he's fun to watch. But I think his plan just kind of was like, okay.
But it made for a fun movie.
It was a fun movie, yeah. But sorry, Silva.
Alright, my number 6, this guy wants a little more cowbell. Zorin. Sorry, I had to do it.
It's okay. It's really bad, Christopher Walken. Mine was pretty bad. That was worse.
I had to do it. Yeah, Zorin is number 6 for me. Pretty much, like, I like how he wants to, like, pretty much blow up, like, what was it, San Fernando Valley?
I think so.
Or San Francisco or something. I know it was San Francisco. Something to do with
Something to do with microchips.
Yeah, in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. But he was ruthless. Like, we mentioned before, he's just, like, a cold-blooded killer. Like, that part where he's in, like, the mine and he's just machine gunning everybody is just like, yeah. That was, at that time, I guess I was kind of pushing the envelope for Bond movies, but I think Bond has really good interactions with him in this movie. And then once he finds out who Bond is, you really, like, it's really kind of like a mystery. It's like, is he going to reveal his true intentions now, or is it going to happen later? But it's Christopher Walken, too. And Christopher Walken does a really good job, so Max Zorin is number 6.
So my number 5 is one of the most classic Bond villains. I was tempted to put him higher. He probably would have expected that for me to put him higher, but Goldfinger.
Yes.
Goldfinger.
Nice.
So I have Goldfinger. He's classic. He's awesome. He's got an amazing face and an amazing voice, and he has such presence on screen. But I couldn't put him any higher because there's just the people coming up I like more than him. But Goldfinger is undeniably a classic Bond villain.
So, number 5 for me, Goldfinger.
Shocking.
Absolutely shocking. Yeah, Goldfinger. Big, awesome German guy. Pretty much wants to take over Fort Knox.
Steal from it.
Yeah, steal from it. Yeah, whatever. Same thing. And with me, I mean, I feel like his screen presence was just... His voice was really loud, I thought, which was really...
Expect you to die!
Yeah, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die! Which I thought was pretty cool. I thought he delivered his lines really well. He, like Pat said, he's a classic villain. I mean, there's no way, like, when you think of villains in films, Goldfinger is definitely one of the villains. And I mean, I wish he was higher up, but I mean, pretty much what Pat said too. I mean, there's just 4 others I think are better.
The man with the Midas touch.
Yes,
Slightest
the man
touch.
with the Midas touch.
Alright, so for my number 4, I have the man with the golden gun. You have him too?
Yes.
Oh wow, we're on a roll. Francisco Scaramanga. Monsieur Scaramanga. Because he's freaking classy, and he's played by Christopher Lee.
He's got 3 nipples.
He's got 3 nipples. It's classy. He's the world's best assassin. He uses a golden gun that's made of like a bunch of different things. He can like sneak around and take apart, like a pen and like
It's like a cigarette case.
a cigarette case too. Is like but it's awesome. And he's after. It seems like he's after Bond, but he's actually got this bigger plan that involves an even bigger golden gun. And he's just awesome because he's so classy and he respects Bond, and Bond kind of respects him. And it's kind of like this cat and mouse, especially at the end, where these 2 like wicked dangerous men like throw down.
The end is the best part of the movie. Yeah. I will say that, especially with the cat and mouse part.
So why do you like Scaramanga?
So Scaramanga, I just like. I mean, physically, like I think his. As weird as it is to have a 3rd nipple, I think that his deformity is pretty interesting.
It's memorable.
It's very memorable.
Bond has to pose as him with a fake nipple.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. See, it inspires other people to have 3 nipples.
Yes.
I like his henchman. I think he's a cool henchman in Knick Knack.
Mm-hmm.
He's an assassin. I like the fact that like he has a golden gun. Like I think Goldfinger also had a golden gun too, but like I think it's kind of weird because he's not like obsessed with like gold. But I mean,
no, he's not.
But at the same time, though, it's just unique since he can take the gun apart, and then it's like we said, a pen, a cigarette case, a cigarette lighter, and it just takes 1 shot to kill somebody. I'm like, anybody who has a gun that takes 1 bullet to kill somebody, whether it be in the head, the stomach,
he's just good.
Or yeah, either that or he could just be good. But if that's the case, if it does take 1 bullet, no matter where you get hit on your body, that is one badass assassin. That's what I will say.
The badass mofo, Scaramanga.
Yes. I'm excited to see what your number 3 is. See if it matches up.
Yep, maybe we'll have a full sweep of matching up in the top 5.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. The moment of truth. The number 3 for me is the first ever Bond villain chronologically. It has a bloody eye, Mr. Le Chiffre from Casino Royale, played by what's his name? Michael
Mads
Mikkelsen.
Mikkelsen or Mikkelsen, I don't know how you say it.
Oh yeah, but he's great. He's a fantastic Bond villain. He's kind of this banker who funds terrorists. He's not really physically imposing, but the poker games are intense because just the tension between him and Bond. It's kind of like they're throwing
stare downs.
Yeah, they're throwing down without any fists, and he's a really good bad guy. And he has a very unexpected death, and it's he's a great villain though.
Alright, so my number 3 differs from Pat's. This is the first Bond movie I ever saw when I was a little kid. Also, the best Bond video game is based off of this movie. The villain in this movie is Elektra, played by Sean Bean. Well, who else? I mean, he always plays a villain. Who has a GoldenEye satellite that he wants to use to, like, cripple England's, like, banks and make them, like, broke, pretty much. He's an interesting character because I feel like at the beginning of the movie, it shows him as an agent with MI6.
006.
006, and then obviously Bond is 007. But it kind of made me thinking, like, at like some point in my life, like every time after I watched this movie, was he really part of MI6 or was that part of his whole plan? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, it's up for debate. I mean, I'm pretty sure he definitely planned that out while he was 006, though.
Yeah, I would say that too. I think he's got a good backstory too. Like the fact that like, you know, the Cold War is over in this, but it kind of ties back to the Cold War with like his parents being like Leanne's Cossack traders or something. That might even go back to World War II. I'm not even sure. But his motivation for like trying to cripple England's banks is like really, really interesting. Him and Bond have a cool like duel at the end of this movie on a satellite dish with Bond like
for England, James?
No, for me.
Alright, so this might be surprising, but my number 2 is Spectre's number 1, Ernst Stavro Blofeld. No? Okay. I like Blofeld because he's just the mastermind behind so many movies. He's so smart and such a good foe for Bond. There's been better iterations of him than in some movies because he switches actors like all the time. There's not much consistency in his story, but for the overall Spectre arc, the initial one of the Connery movies, he's a fantastic main mastermind behind everything.
There's also no consistency in his deformity.
No consistency in his deformity. Nope. But yeah, the guy who spawned the look of Dr. Evil in Austin Powers.
And will be brought back to screen this year. Hopefully.
Yep.
We're hoping.
Spectre.
Yeah. The title gives us hope, but
Ernst Stavro Blofeld.
We'll see. So my number 2 is number 2 in Spectre.
Largo?
No, I fucking hate that guy. My number 2 is the man from the first, and personally my second favorite Bond movie.
First Bond movie? Did you already say Doctor No?
No, second favorite Bond movie. The first mission for Bond.
Gotcha.
I was gonna say first Daniel Craig movie, didn't really come out. But is Le Chiffre. Le Chiffre's got a cool bleeding eye. It was actually something that I never picked up on when I first saw this movie. I think that the fact that like he's like the world like terrorist organizations like banker, like he's the banker for like terrorist organizations across the world is interesting, and like Pat said too, the tension with him and Bond in like the poker game is like crazy.
He's like, also like the only villain who's like tortured Bond.
Yeah,
like,
he
really
is.
Badly.
Yes,
yeah,
he is, and he'll do like anything he can to get like his money that he loses back. So
he's a little weasel.
Yeah, he is a little weasel. I don't know. He's Quantum's. I don't know what number man, but I mean he's part of the Quantum organization.
I get the feeling it wasn't like directly tied to them, but like because he was working for Mr.
He probably could have been, yeah. So, and I want to point out one thing about Le Chiffre, and for a villain, he actually gets killed at the end of the second act of the movie, which I found kind of interesting. So the whole third act doesn't have Le Chiffre in the movie, so that was an interesting way of writing Le Chiffre's character. So it's Le Chiffre number 2 for me. All right.
So at the top 3 of ours, we had the same villains,
Flip-flopped
just
a little bit.
jumbled around a bit. My number 1, by far, Alec Trevelyan, 006,
Take it.
Yanis from GoldenEye, because to me, Alec represents everything a good Bond villain should be. He has a great scheme. His backstory is interesting, and his relationship with Bond, like I said before, if it's personal, it makes it just so much more. And he's like Bond's best friend initially.
It's like Bond's equal.
Yeah, that's the thing about him. He's like the antithesis to Bond. He's trained by the same people. He's just as good as Bond. And Sean Bean, who plays him, is phenomenal, because you could even picture Sean Bean as James Bond, you know? Like, he's got the charm, but there's a little darker edge to him then, especially to Pierce Brosnan. So, to me, Trevelyan represents everything a good Bond bad guy should be. And I love him, and he's great, and he's fantastic to watch.
Half of everything is luck.
You set the timer for 3 minutes instead of 6.
Alright, number 1 for me, the bald guy, Ernst Stavro Blofeld. I don't know, does he have a scar on his face or not? Like, because 2 of the movies he doesn't.
In the first one.
Okay, yeah. So he must have had, like, plastic surgery or something.
I'm pretty sure he does.
But I think he's got a cool deformity. Like, it looks like you could see through his skin. And You Only Live Twice. He is the head of SPECTRE, which is this terrorist organization that Bond has been hunting since, like, day 1 when these movies first came out. And I like how he's kind of like the first few Bond movies at least. He's kind of more of like a behind the scenes type of guy. He's sending like all his different numbers, and you can see he's petting Mr. Bigglesworth.
Just his kitty. He's just stroking his kitty.
Yeah,
can't see his face.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I like how he's like more of like a behind the scenes kind of guy. Like, he doesn't face Bond until the 5th Bond movie, and quite frankly, like, Spectre isn't even a big part in Goldfinger. They're not even in Goldfinger, actually. So I kind of like how there's a little break in between there, and, I mean, he's just got all these other people to take down Bond. He's like, why deal with him myself when I could just send all these other guys instead of risking getting myself killed?
He's like the ultimate mastermind.
Yeah, he is. Mm-hmm. He gets everything he wants, pretty much. I just don't like his portrayals later in the series, with like especially on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yep, Diamonds Are Forever.
And Diamonds Are, those 2 are complete bullshit. But I mean, but overall though, as like a villain, like, he's got really good plans. I like how he's more of a behind the scenes type of guy, and if Spectre is bringing him back, and the title Spectre indicates that they are bringing him back, and Christoph Waltz is playing him, I hope that it is like the best thing ever to happen to cinema. So I'm serious.
Okay.
So that concludes our top 10 best Bond villains list.
But we do have a little extra feature.
All right, we might cover this on another list, but we had came up with who we thought our top worst villain was. For me, Gustav Graves. Mm-hmm. I honestly,
From Die Another Day.
Honestly, like, it doesn't make sense that he's like, I don't buy the fact that a North Korean guy can have like that much plastic surgery.
You gotta suspend your belief.
Exactly, but I mean, like, he's got that stupid like laser beam that like breaks
Icarus.
ice called Icarus.
Yeah.
You might as well call it Kid Icarus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, I don't know how Bond like doesn't see through that ruse. Like, I mean, when he before the sword fight, when he's like, "Have we met before?" Like, Bond doesn't even like. How does he not know?
Well, I mean, I don't think he'd expect the North Korean guy to look like a British man.
Exactly, and like become like a billionaire playboy in like a day.
The thing is, I don't mind Graves because I like that he even says to Bond, like, I modeled my new self after you. Like, this kind of like charming, like obnoxious British man. Like, Graves isn't my least favorite by any means, but he's not a particularly strong villain. And Toby Stevens, I love him. He's amazing.
I love Toby Stevens, but I just don't love
He's
Graves.
an alright Bond villain in a bad Bond movie, so he kind of gets dragged down a bit.
Yeah, I guess that's part of it too. But I mean, I don't know. I just don't like that whole stupid laser beam part.
I could see why. So my least favorite Bond villain of all time is Dominic Green from Quantum of Solace. There is nothing memorable about Dominic Green.
Except to get stabbed in the foot with an axe.
Yeah, but he's just like this really boring, bland Bond villain. There's nothing distinguishing about him. He's just a squirrely little French asshole who just like plans, I'm going to steal the water in this country, Mr. Bond.
He was one of my best
Why
geologists.
does everybody wither and die? It's just like, shut up. Mr. Green. Like, you're not interesting. If you weren't associated with Quantum, I wouldn't give a shit about you. So, yeah, I would have preferred Mr. White be the main bad guy of Quantum.
You probably should have
than Dominic Green. Mr. White at least has some screen presence. Like, Dominic Green's this little, unintimidating little craphead.
Yeah.
I can't stand Dominic Green.
Bitch.
Especially after Le Chiffre. He's following up Le Chiffre as a bad guy. He's terrible.
Yeah, that is a pretty weak way to follow up Casino Royale.
Yeah, just not a fan of Mr. Green.
Alright, so now that finishes off the list of top 10 Bond villains. Be sure to check out our other videos coming your way. We'll be doing a lot more top 10 today and tomorrow. Yeah, so we'll have more of those up for you guys. So we'll see you later.
Bye.